The sky burned crimson as the alien dreadnought split through the clouds like a cosmic blade, vaporizing an entire city block with one pulse of its cannon. In the middle of the chaos, a soldier screamed into his radio, his voice cracking with fear, begging for orders that would never come because Earth's forces were already in retreat. Over the comms, the commander's last words before static swallowed him whole were as unforgettable as they were hopeless. "We are out of time." And then silence. The streets below became a storm of screams, running feet, and falling ash. 3 days earlier, Earth thought it was winning. Humanity had cobbled together fleets of ships, bristling with weapons so advanced that military engineers toasted themselves as saviors of the species. Politicians promised the alien menace would be driven back before the summer ended. News networks ran heroic footage of shiny battleships cruising through orbit while brass bands played. It was the kind of propaganda people wanted to believe in. Then the alien commanders arrived, and all that confidence turned into a smoking crater in less than 48 hours. The alien commanders were not like the first wave of invaders. They were organized, precise, terrifyingly brilliant. Instead of random attacks, they dismantled Earth's defenses with almost surgical cruelty. The orbital platforms fell first, collapsing into the atmosphere like flaming coins flicked from heaven. Earth's fleet tried to retaliate, and found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Someone in the military described it as playing chess against opponents who already knew every move you would make 3 turns in advance. On the ground, civilians flooded shelters, cities fell under martial law, and every available pilot was thrown into the fight. But the aliens seemed to enjoy baiting humanity into losing battles rather than simply obliterating everything outright. That was worse, somehow. Like watching a cat toy with a mouse before killing it. Panic began to seep into military leadership. People started whispering the word surrender. Then someone mentioned his name. Elias Cain. No one wanted to say it out loud at first, as if speaking it might summon the man himself, storming into the room like a hangover you weren't ready for. Some younger officers didn't even know who he was beyond whispers and old war footage buried in classified archives. The older ones knew better. They traded uneasy looks, muttering stories about him under their breath, tales of reckless heroics and brutal victories so decisive they bordered on the mythic. But attached to every legend about Elias Cain was the same warning: the man did not believe in mercy. At that exact moment, while Earth's High Command debated whether to find him, Elias Cain sat alone in a dimly lit bar on the edge of the Nevada desert, drinking cheap whiskey like the world wasn't collapsing outside. He hadn't worn a uniform in years. His hair was grayer now, his jaw a little harder, but his eyes still held the sharpness of a man who had seen too much war and refused to blink. The bartender, who had served him long enough to know better than to ask about his past, only refilled his glass in silence. The news played on the bar's ancient television, showing collapsing cities and alien fleets blotting out the sky. Around Elias, a few locals cursed under their breath, others just drank harder, but no one looked at him directly. They all knew this man had once been someone important, someone dangerous, someone the military probably wished was still on their side. He remembered the day he quit the war. It wasn't a resignation so much as a volcanic eruption. He had led a mission years ago, one that ended with thousands dead because he followed orders that turned out to be wrong. The brass blamed him to save their own skins. He blamed them because they deserved it. When the dust settled, he walked away and never looked back. Until now. Military vehicles rolled into the parking lot like wolves circling prey. Soldiers poured out, surrounding the bar. Elias didn't move. He kept sipping his drink as the door slammed open and a woman in a sharp uniform strode in. "Captain Elias Cain?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. Elias glanced at her, unimpressed. "I retired," he said, draining his glass. "Earth needs you," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it. Fear. Desperation. "The alien commanders are tearing us apart. We have no one who can stop them." Elias leaned back in his chair, studying her. Outside, the soldiers stood rigid, pretending they weren't terrified of the man sitting calmly before them. He had once been their hero. Now they looked at him like he was a weapon they weren't sure they could control. He lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "You don't want me," he said finally. "Why not?" "Because I don't play nice," he said, his eyes locking on hers with unsettling calm. "And when I go to war, I don't stop until it's over. One way or another." The woman hesitated, then handed him a tablet. On it played footage of the alien commanders destroying Earth's defenses, laughing in their strange, guttural language as human ships burned. Elias watched without blinking, his expression unreadable. "You're our last chance," she said. Elias set the cigarette down, crushed it out, and stood. For the first time, a hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fine," he said. "Let's remind the universe why they call me the man with no mercy." Outside, the soldiers shifted nervously as Elias walked past them toward the waiting transport. One whispered to another, thinking Elias couldn't hear. "God help the aliens," the soldier muttered. Elias climbed aboard without looking back, his mind already sharpening like a blade. Somewhere out there, alien commanders were laughing. They wouldn't be for long. The transport roared through the night sky, heading toward the main Earth Defense Command Center, its engines leaving trails of fire in the darkness. Inside, Elias Cain sat with his arms crossed, staring out at the desert below as though the world falling apart outside had nothing to do with him. The soldiers who had come to collect him kept glancing his way like he was some wild animal they had dragged into their cage, one they were afraid might decide to eat them at any moment. No one dared speak until the officer from the bar, the woman in the sharp uniform, finally broke the silence. "My name's Commander Silva," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the turbulence rattling the cabin. "High Command wants you fully briefed the moment we land." Elias didn't turn from the window. "High Command," he repeated dryly. "Still a bunch of politicians in uniform pretending they know how to win wars?" Silva stiffened. "They're the ones who called you back." Elias finally looked at her, his gaze so direct it felt like a punch. "No. They called me because they're losing. Big difference." The soldiers exchanged glances. One of them smirked until Elias caught his eye. The smirk vanished so fast it was like it had been erased. Silva exhaled slowly, clearly regretting her assignment already. When the transport landed, Elias stepped out to find the Earth Defense Command Center looking more like a collapsing anthill than a headquarters. Sirens wailed in the distance. Screens across the walls showed alien fleets cutting through human defenses with terrifying precision. Technicians sprinted through the corridors clutching tablets. Officers barked orders that no one seemed to follow fast enough. It was chaos wrapped in uniforms. Elias was taken straight to the war room, a cavernous chamber with a holographic table in the center showing the battlefront in real time. Red markers representing alien forces dominated the map, while the few blue human ones blinked like dying embers. Around the table stood generals, admirals, intelligence officers, and the president herself, all looking like they had aged 20 years in the last 2 days. "This is him?" one general said skeptically as Elias entered. "This is the man with no mercy?" Elias glanced at him with mild disinterest. "You were expecting someone taller?" The president raised a hand before the general could respond. "Captain Cain, thank you for coming on such short notice. Didn't give me much choice," Elias said, folding his arms. "We need your expertise," she continued, ignoring the barb. "The alien commanders have outmaneuvered every counter-strike we've launched. We've lost 7 fleets in 48 hours. Our orbital defenses are gone. If this continues, Earth falls within the week." Elias studied the holographic map, his face revealing nothing. "And you want me to fix it? You're the only one who's ever beaten them before," the president said. "The old reports say you predicted their tactics before anyone else even understood how they fought." Elias smirked faintly. "The reports leave out the part where I told your predecessors they were idiots for ignoring me until half our fleet was scrap." One of the admirals bristled. "We have protocols now. A chain of command." Elias turned his gaze on him like a hawk spotting a mouse. "Protocols are why you're losing." He pointed at the map, where more blue markers were disappearing by the minute. They know exactly how you think. You fight like humans. They don't? Murmurs rippled around the table. The president cleared her throat. What do you need to turn this around? Elias looked straight at her. Total command of all Earth forces. No committees. No debates. I give orders, they get followed. Immediately. The room erupted. Generals shouted about regulations, chains of command, accountability. Someone accused him of staging a power grab. Elias waited until the noise peaked before speaking in a voice so calm it cut through the chaos like a blade. Keep running things your way, he said, and you won't have a planet left to argue over by the weekend. The president studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. He has it, she said. The protests grew louder, but she silenced them with a single raised hand. We called him back for results, not bureaucracy. Elias turned back to the map. Good. Then here's your first order. Assemble every remaining ship at these coordinates. He tapped a section of the holographic display, a point just outside lunar orbit. One general frowned. That's empty space. There's nothing there. Exactly, Elias said. They'll expect you to defend the colonies near Mars or the orbital stations over Earth. We give them what they don't expect. Commander Silva, standing off to the side, looked at him curiously. You're planning an ambush. Elias allowed himself the faintest grin. About time they felt one for a change. Over the next few hours, orders flew across the planet as fleets regrouped under Elias's command. Some officers grumbled, others obeyed reluctantly, but the shift was unmistakable. For the first time since the alien commanders arrived, Earth's forces moved with purpose instead of panic. While preparations unfolded, Elias met his new team. First was Dr. Julian Mercer, a scientist with wild hair, a nervous twitch, and a habit of mumbling to himself about probabilities and death tolls in the same sentence. He looked like the kind of man who might invent either a brilliant weapon or an accidental doomsday device before breakfast. Next came Lieutenant Mara Vance, a linguist assigned to intercept and decode alien transmissions. She was sharp-eyed, sarcastic, and already muttering about how the aliens spoke in 17 layers of metaphor that made everything sound like threats about eating your ancestors. Finally, there was Colonel Briggs, Earth's current Golden Boy commander, who greeted Elias with a smile so fake it belonged on a billboard. He made no effort to hide his disdain. Never thought I'd be taking orders from you, Briggs said smoothly. Heard you left the service in disgrace. Disgrace? Elias repeated, meeting his eyes. That what they call winning wars these days? Briggs's smile tightened. When the fleet assembled, Elias launched his plan. The ships hid behind the moon's shadow, waiting as bait signals drew the alien commanders straight into the trap. For the first time since the war began, Earth struck first. Explosions lit up the void as alien ships reeled under the sudden assault. For a moment, it seemed like the tide was turning. Officers in the command center cheered as alien vessels disintegrated in blossoms of fire. But Elias didn't cheer. He watched the holographic map with a frown as the alien fleet regrouped faster than expected, moving with eerie precision. It was too fast. Too organized. And then it hit him. They knew, he muttered. On the map, new alien signals appeared behind Earth's fleet, cutting off their retreat. The ambush had become a trap. Elias Cain had just realized the alien commanders were smarter than he thought. The alarm screamed through the command center as the holographic map filled with hostile markers surrounding Earth's fleet like sharks circling a bleeding whale. Officers shouted over each other, trying to coordinate a retreat, while alien ships closed in from every direction. The cheer from moments ago was gone, replaced by the raw edge of panic. Elias Cain stood perfectly still in the middle of the chaos, eyes locked on the map, his face carved from stone. The aliens had turned his ambush into a slaughter in less than 5 minutes. It should have been impossible. Fall back, one admiral barked, his voice cracking as ships began to vanish from the display. Too late for that, Elias said, his tone flat. He watched the alien movements carefully. They weren't just attacking. They were herding Earth's forces into tight clusters, cutting off escape vectors with terrifying precision. "They're not trying to wipe us out here. They want prisoners." Commander Silva turned sharply toward him. "Prisoners? What for?" Elias didn't answer. He was already studying the few open paths left on the map, calculating options like a man playing 10 games of chess at once. With a single gesture, he highlighted a narrow corridor between enemy formations. "Get the fleet through here," he ordered. "That leads them straight toward the dark side of the moon," Briggs said sharply, his tone half accusation, half triumph, as though waiting for Elias to make a fatal mistake. "Exactly," Elias said. "The lunar mines still have defense platforms. The aliens don't know we can remote activate them." Briggs opened his mouth to argue but was cut off as Silva relayed the order. A moment later, automated rail cannons buried in the moon's surface came online, firing streams of tungsten slugs into space. The alien encirclement faltered just long enough for the surviving human ships to punch through. It wasn't victory. But it wasn't annihilation either. When the last Earth ship escaped, the alien fleet withdrew instead of pursuing. That was what unsettled Elias the most. They could have finished the job, but they hadn't. It felt deliberate. Like they wanted him to wonder why. Hours later, back at Earth Defense Command, the survivors counted their losses. Dozens of ships destroyed. Thousands dead. The victory they had celebrated for all of 5 minutes turned to ash. Briggs wasted no time seizing the moment. "This is what happens when you put a relic in charge," Briggs snapped, jabbing a finger toward Elias. "He promised us a win, and instead we got a massacre." Elias didn't even glance at him. He was staring at the battle recordings playing across the room's main screen. Something about the alien movements gnawed at him. Their precision. Their timing. The way they had predicted everything he did. "They weren't after our fleet," Elias said finally, more to himself than anyone else. "They wanted someone." Silva frowned. "Someone?" "Bring up the prisoner logs," Elias said. A technician complied, revealing a list of personnel captured during the retreat. Among the names were pilots, engineers, and one intelligence officer with high-level clearance. Elias felt his stomach tighten. The aliens hadn't just taken random prisoners. They had taken people who knew things. Before anyone could process that, a sensor officer shouted from his station. "Unidentified craft approaching. Single ship. Not one of ours." Every weapon in orbit locked onto the incoming vessel as it descended toward Earth's atmosphere. It didn't fire. It didn't evade. It simply landed outside the command center like it had been invited. The doors hissed open moments later, and 2 soldiers escorted in something no one expected to see alive, an alien commander. It was tall, reptilian, armored in something that shimmered between metal and flesh. Its eyes burned like molten gold as it scanned the room with disdain. One of the soldiers shoved it forward, but it didn't resist. It moved with slow, deliberate confidence, as though the entire planet belonged to it already. Silva tensed. "How did we get this thing?" "Escape pod," a soldier said. "Recovered after the battle. It surrendered." That single word rippled through the room like electricity. The alien spoke in a guttural, grinding language. Lieutenant Mara Vance, the linguist, stepped forward with a tablet, frantically running translations. Her brow furrowed. "It says it wants to speak to the one in charge," she said slowly. "It wants Elias Cain." Every eye turned toward Elias. Briggs looked ready to explode. "This is absurd," he snapped. "It's probably here to feed him disinformation. We should dissect it, not talk to it." Elias ignored him and approached the alien commander. Up close, he saw the scars across its armor, the faint rasp of its breathing, the way its gaze locked onto him with something almost like recognition. Through Vance's translation, the alien spoke again. "It says," she translated carefully, "that its name is Koresh. And it says you have done this before." The room went silent. Elias felt the weight of old memories pressing against him like ghosts. He had seen this species once before, years ago, during a covert mission that never made the official records. Back then, It hadn't been war. It had been something else. Something worse. "What do you want?" Elias asked. Koresh's reply came through Vance after a long pause. "The war will end soon. Your people will die unless you stop the High Commanders. I can help you. But only you." Briggs slammed his fist on the table. "You can't be serious. This thing just slaughtered half our fleet." Koresh turned its gaze on Briggs with cold amusement and spoke directly, the translation coming a moment later. "Half your fleet? That was mercy." The alien's eyes shifted back to Elias. It explained in chilling fragments that the High Commanders had grown ambitious, even ruthless by alien standards. Koresh claimed it had been part of a failed attempt to challenge them, and now sought revenge. In exchange for its life, it would give Elias the locations of their command ships, and the key to disrupting their fleet coordination. It was too good. Too convenient. Elias knew everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. Trap. But if Koresh was telling the truth, this was the first real advantage humanity had been offered since the war began. Elias stared at the alien for a long moment, then said quietly, "Unshackle it." The room erupted in protest. Generals shouted. Briggs cursed. Silva looked like she'd swallowed a knife. But Elias didn't flinch. "You want to win this war?" he said over the chaos. "Then we're going to need the devil on our side." Koresh smiled. At least, it looked like a smile. And for the first time, Elias wondered if he had just made a deal humanity would regret forever. The decision to unshackle Koresh spread through the command center like a lightning strike. Officers muttered angrily, Briggs stormed out of the room swearing vengeance on every level of leadership, and Silva stood rigid at Elias's side like she was witnessing a man casually lighting himself on fire. Koresh, however, seemed completely unfazed by the uproar. The alien commander simply stood there, tall and silent, eyes glowing faintly as if amused by the chaos its presence created. Elias ignored the noise. He had seen this reaction before, years ago, when decisions had to be made quickly and no one wanted to take the blame if it went wrong. But he knew a simple truth about war: hesitation killed more people than bullets ever could. The interrogation chamber was sealed off from the rest of the base, a heavy metal room deep underground where even whispers felt too loud. Koresh sat calmly at the table while Mara Vance translated the guttural alien's speech into clipped English. The alien described the high commanders in unsettling detail. They were not mere soldiers, it explained, but conquerors who believed in dismantling civilizations piece by piece until no resistance remained. Humanity had not been their first target, nor would it be their last. Their strength came from a single source: a fleet-wide neural command network that allowed them to coordinate with impossible precision, predicting enemy movements and adapting strategies in real time. Destroy the network, Koresh said, and the alien forces would fall into disarray. Elias listened carefully, asking few questions, his expression unreadable. Silva paced like a caged animal. Mara kept glancing at the alien like she expected it to sprout fangs and lunge at them mid-sentence. When Koresh revealed the location of the central relay ship controlling the network, Elias finally spoke. His voice was calm, too calm. "And you want revenge on your own commanders? Why?" Koresh turned its molten gaze toward him. The translation came after a long pause. "Because they betrayed me before I betrayed them." Elias didn't press further. He had met enough soldiers across enough battlefields to know vengeance was a universal language. Within hours, plans were underway to strike the relay ship. Elias insisted on a small, fast task force instead of a full-scale assault. A fleet would be too obvious, he argued. The aliens would see it coming miles away. A surgical strike gave them a chance at surprise. That was when Briggs reappeared, marching into the planning room with the fury of a man who had spent every minute since the interrogation gathering ammunition of his own. And he had found it. He threw a tablet onto the table, its screen flashing classified reports. "You want to trust him?" Briggs snarled, jabbing a finger toward Elias. "Then maybe you should all know who you're dealing with. Your so-called savior didn't just fight the aliens before. He cut a deal with them. The room went silent. Briggs played grainy footage showing a younger Elias years ago on some distant outpost, speaking to alien envoys during what was supposed to be a ceasefire. The video had no sound, but it showed him shaking hands with a commander who looked very much like Koresh. Minutes later, the footage switched to scenes of the outpost burning, human soldiers retreating, civilians screaming as alien forces swept through. Briggs's voice was poison. That was Cestus 9. 10,000 dead because Cain trusted them. Because he thought he could outsmart them. And now he wants to do it again. Elias didn't flinch. I didn't trust them, he said flatly. I used them. There's a difference. Tell that to the graves on Cestus 9. Briggs shot back. Silva looked between them, her expression torn. The officers murmured uneasily. Even Mara stopped translating for Koresh, who watched the exchange with something that might have been amusement flickering in its alien eyes. Elias stepped closer to Briggs, his voice low but carrying enough force to silence the room. You think I don't remember Cestus 9? I was there when Command ignored the intel I gave them about the ambush waiting for us. I watched them send reinforcements into a slaughter because they didn't want to look weak during peace talks. They blamed me because someone had to take the fall. But I didn't kill those people. Bureaucrats did. Briggs sneered. Convenient story. Elias leaned in slightly, eyes cold. You want to lead this mission, Briggs? Be my guest. You won't last 10 minutes out there. The tension cracked the room in half until the President herself intervened via secure feed, her face tight with exhaustion. Enough, she ordered. Personal grudges won't win this war. Captain Cain has command. This mission proceeds as planned. Briggs's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. The strike team launched the next day. A handful of ships cut through the blackness of space, moving fast and silent toward the relay ship's coordinates. The plan was simple: board it, plant charges on its central core, and cripple the network before the high commanders realized what was happening. It went wrong immediately. The moment they reached the relay ship, alien forces poured out from hidden hangars like they had been waiting the whole time. The firefight in orbit was brutal and one-sided. Elias's team barely punched through the defenses to land inside the relay ship's structure. The corridors twisted like a maze, lit by pulsing alien symbols that made human eyes ache to look at them. Halfway to the core, the team was ambushed again. Plasma fire turned the metallic hallways into killing grounds. One of the squad leaders, Captain Harlow, was hit while dragging civilians out of the line of fire after they stumbled across what looked like prison cells holding human captives. He went down hard, bleeding out before the medic could reach him. The loss hit the team like a hammer. Harlow had been one of the best, a man with a reputation for pulling off impossible rescues. Now he was another name for the casualty list. Elias said nothing, but his jaw tightened as they pushed on, leaving the bodies behind because there was no time to stop. They reached the core under relentless fire, planting the charges as alarms wailed through the alien ship. When the explosives detonated, the entire vessel shuddered, lights flickering as systems died one by one. Through the windows, they saw alien ships outside suddenly breaking formation, colliding with each other, moving like insects without a hive. The network was down. But the victory came at a price. Briggs, furious over Harlow's death and the mounting losses, confronted Elias the moment they returned to the command center. This is what following you gets us, Briggs snarled. Dead soldiers. Half a fleet gone. And you still think you can win? Elias met his glare without blinking. We just cut their coordination to pieces. Next time we hit them, they bleed for real. Briggs stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. Or maybe next time, we finally put you in the ground before you get the rest of us killed. It wasn't an idle threat. And from the look in his eyes, Elias knew Briggs meant every word. The destruction of the relay ship changed everything in the span of a single day. Across the solar system, alien fleets staggered like puppets with cut strings, their flawless coordination shattered. Battles that had been one-sided massacres turned into messy brawls where humanity could finally hit back. News feeds across Earth showed triumphant images of alien ships falling from the sky while politicians gave rousing speeches about turning tides and victories ahead. But Elias Cain watched it all with the expression of a man reading his own obituary. He knew better than anyone that winning one battle never meant winning the war. In the command center, Koresh confirmed his fears. The alien commander stood in the middle of the room like a living shadow, watching the chaos of human celebration with the patience of something that had seen centuries of war. Through Mara Vance's tired translations, it warned that the high commanders would regroup quickly. The network was down, yes, but the alien leaders themselves were still alive, and they would not flee or surrender. They would adapt, just as Elias had adapted. And when they did, Earth would face retaliation on a scale it had never imagined. The only chance, Koresh said, was to kill them all at once. Every high commander in one strike. Elias didn't ask how impossible that sounded. He already knew it was suicide. The alien leaders operated from a colossal dreadnought orbiting near Jupiter, protected by entire fleets and defenses thicker than a planetary shield. Attacking it was madness. But leaving them alive was worse. Briggs wasted no time seizing the moment. He pointed at the hollow map with a bitter smile, voice dripping with scorn. "There it is, gentlemen. The Cain Doctrine. Hit them head on and hope we all die fast enough not to notice the disaster." Elias didn't rise to the bait. He simply said, "We get aboard that dreadnought, we kill the commanders, the war ends. Anything less is a slow death for Earth." The president's voice crackled through the calms from Earth. "Do it," she ordered, silencing every protest in the room. Preparations began immediately. Elias assembled the same strike team, smaller this time, because stealth was the only advantage they had left. Mara Vance came despite having no combat training, because she was the only one who could understand alien systems. Dr. Mercer, the jittery scientist, insisted on bringing a prototype bomb he claimed could breach the dreadnought's core reactors. The device looked like it had been built in a garage by a lunatic, which was probably true, but Mercer swore it would work. Silva joined too, her loyalty to Elias unshaken despite Briggs's growing circle of supporters whispering about removing him after the mission failed. Koresh came as well. The alien commander moved among the humans with cold grace, ignored the stares and muttered curses, and never explained why it was helping them. Elias wondered if it was revenge, honor, or simply madness. Maybe all three. The approach to the dreadnought was silent and tense. Their stolen alien shuttle slipped through the outer defenses using Koresh's access codes, drifting among warships so massive they blotted out the stars. The dreadnought itself loomed ahead like a floating continent of metal and fire, its surface crawling with weapon emplacements and fighter bays. It felt less like approaching a ship and more like trying to sneak into the heart of a living god. Inside, things went wrong immediately. The access codes got them through the outer hangar, but as soon as they entered the main corridors, alarms began wailing. Koresh hissed something in its language, translated by Mara as a curse about the High Commander's changing security protocols. Armed alien soldiers poured into the hallways, plasma fire turning the air into a storm of heat and light. The strike team split as planned, planting charges and fighting their way toward the command deck. Mercer clutched the prototype bomb like a terrified father carrying his firstborn through a war zone, mumbling equations under his breath as stray shots sizzled past his head. Mara tried to keep translating alien chatter, but half the time she shouted warnings that made no sense, like, "They are threatening to turn our skulls into lanterns," or, "I think one of them just compared us to diseased cattle." Briggs fought like a man trying to win glory for himself alone, cutting down aliens with ruthless precision while throwing Elias dark looks between shots. The rivalry between them had reached a breaking point. When an alien grenade landed near the squad, Briggs hesitated just long enough to make Elias dive for it himself, hurling it back down the corridor before it detonated. Elias didn't call him out. Not yet. The team reached the command deck after what felt like hours of brutal fighting. The high commanders awaited them there, towering figures in ornate armor that gleamed like the bones of dead suns. They did not look surprised. One of them spoke in a deep, resonant voice that made the walls vibrate. Mara translated in a whisper. They knew you were coming, she said. They say this is exactly where they wanted you. Before Elias could react, alien reinforcements sealed off the exits. The High Commanders activated some kind of energy barrier around the chamber, crackling walls of light trapping the humans inside. It was a kill box. Briggs rounded on Elias immediately. You led us into a slaughter, he shouted over the rising noise. Just like Cestus 9. Elias ignored him, eyes fixed on the alien leaders. Something about the way they stood there, calm and waiting, told him this wasn't just a simple ambush. They wanted him alive. They could have killed the team already, but they hadn't. Koresh stepped forward, speaking rapidly in its language. Mara's translation faltered as she tried to keep up. It's challenging them. It says they are cowards hiding behind soldiers. It says if they had honor, they would face you directly. To everyone's shock, the High Commanders accepted. The barrier dropped. Their soldiers held position, watching, as if eager to see blood spilled. One of the alien leaders drew a weapon shaped like a blade made of burning light and advanced toward Elias. Briggs looked at him like he was insane. You're not actually going to fight that thing? Elias picked up a fallen alien spear, spinning it once in his hands. His voice was calm, almost casual. Yeah. I am. The duel was fast, vicious, nothing like the clean battles and training vids. Elias fought with the precision of a man who had spent his entire life at war, every strike calculated, every movement efficient. But the alien leader was stronger, faster, its glowing blade carving sparks from walls and floor as Elias barely dodged killing blows. Finally, Elias drove the spear through a gap in the alien's armor, twisting hard. The High Commander collapsed with a roar that shook the chamber. The others stepped back. Not in fear. In fury. And that was when Mercer, shaking and pale, announced that the prototype bomb was armed and counting down. They had 5 minutes to escape, or the entire dreadnought was going to turn into a star-sized fireball. The alien soldiers surged forward as the team fought to retreat, dragging the wounded and covering Mercer as he carried the bomb like a holy relic. The High Commanders bellowed orders, their calm gone, the trap unraveling as panic finally touched even them. Elias didn't feel victory. Not yet. He knew 5 minutes was a very long time to stay alive. The corridors of the dreadnought became a furnace of light and metal as the bomb's timer ticked down. Alien soldiers stormed from every direction, firing plasma bolts that scorched walls and tore through anything in their path. The strike team fought its way forward in a desperate retreat, every second drowned in noise and chaos. Mercer clung to the prototype bomb like a man carrying his own death sentence, the device's lights pulsing faster as the countdown reached 4 minutes. Elias moved at the front, cutting down anything that blocked the path, his mind calculating routes even as the walls shook around them. The dreadnought was alive with fury now, alarms screaming, alien orders echoing in guttural roars through the halls. They reached a hangar bay only to find it crawling with enemy soldiers. The team dove behind crates and shattered equipment as plasma fire turned the air into a storm of heat. Silva snapped orders over the comms, her voice hoarse from shouting, directing their forces to cover the exits while Mara tried frantically to translate alien chatter. It was almost impossible over the noise, but one phrase kept repeating in the alien language, cold and rhythmic like a drumbeat. Mara's face went pale as she decoded it. They were sealing the hangar doors, trapping them inside to die with the ship. Briggs cursed them all as he fired from behind a scorched crate, his rage boiling over. He shouted at Elias between bursts of gunfire, blaming him for every soldier who had fallen since the mission began. Elias didn't respond. He was watching the hangar ceiling where fighters were docked, calculating fuel lines, blast radius, structural supports. He spotted what he needed halfway up the wall, a cluster of fuel cells behind a row of alien fighters. He barked orders for covering fire, then sprinted across the open floor through a hail of plasma bolts. One struck his shoulder, spinning him halfway around, but he kept moving, ripping the pin from a grenade and hurling it into the fuel cells before diving behind a collapsed scaffolding. The explosion ripped through the hangar like the wrath of heaven. Fighters spun like toys as the fireball rolled across the ceiling, tearing open sections of wall and throwing alien soldiers into the void as emergency shields struggled to activate. The hangar doors froze halfway shut, their systems crippled, leaving a narrow path to escape through the wreckage. They pushed forward again, dragging Mercer and his bomb toward the waiting shuttle as alien soldiers regrouped behind them. The prototype's timer hit 3 minutes. The team fell back across the bay, firing constantly to hold off the advancing enemy. Silva went down when a blast caught her in the leg, screaming at everyone to keep moving even as Elias hauled her upright. Briggs took a shot across his helmet that spun him sideways but somehow didn't kill him, though the look he gave Elias through the cracked visor promised that this feud between them was far from over. They reached the shuttle with 2.5 minutes left. Mercer stumbled inside first, clutching the bomb to his chest like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Mara followed, still muttering alien translations under her breath like prayers as if words might save them. Silva limped aboard with Elias shoving her up the ramp while covering the rear with short, controlled bursts of rifle fire. Briggs was the last one through, slamming the hatch shut behind him as alien soldiers charged across the bay toward them. The shuttle tore free of the hangar into open space, engines burning white as they fled the dreadnought. Through the viewport they saw alien fighters launching in pursuit, streaking after them like a swarm of hornets. Briggs took the gunner's seat, spitting curses as he fired the shuttle's cannons at anything that moved. Fighters exploded in blossoms of flame behind them, but more kept coming, cutting the distance as the dreadnought loomed larger and larger on the scanners behind them. The bomb's timer hit 1 minute. Mercer's voice cracked as he shouted over the noise, warning that the blast radius would consume anything within 500,000 kilometers. They had to outrun it, or they were all going to vanish with the dreadnought. The shuttle engine screamed as Elias pushed them to maximum, the hull rattling like it might shake itself apart. Alien fighters closed in from both flanks, filling the air with plasma fire until the shuttle shields flared red from the heat. Briggs cursed and fired back, dropping 2 then 3, but a 4th clipped their wing and sent them spinning before Elias leveled them out again with hands steady as stone. The timer hit 10 seconds. The shuttle was barely clear of the dreadnought's gravity well when the bomb detonated. The explosion bloomed like a second sun tearing itself into existence. The dreadnought ripped apart in a chain reaction of blinding fire, pieces of its colossal frame spiraling outward as shockwaves tore through the alien fleet. Fighters vanished in the blast. Whole warships buckled and broke apart under the expanding inferno. For a moment, the entire sky behind them was nothing but light and flame, as if a star had died in silence. The pursuing fighters disintegrated before they could even turn away. The shuttle was thrown forward by the blast wave, alarms screaming, systems flickering as Elias fought the controls. Fire rolled across space behind them like the universe itself was burning. Then silence returned, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. The dreadnought was gone. Koresh stood in the middle of the cabin, staring at the distant wreckage. The alien commander said nothing for a long time before murmuring in its language. Mara translated softly. It said the high commanders were dead. The war was over. On Earth, days later, humanity celebrated like never before. Cities lit up with fireworks. Politicians made speeches about victory and sacrifice. Streets filled with people cheering the names of soldiers who had fallen. Briggs gave interviews painting himself as the hero of the mission, omitting any mention of the fights with Elias or the grenade Elias had thrown to save them all. Mercer became famous for building the bomb, though he privately admitted to Mara he had only been 80% sure it would even work. Silva recovered in a military hospital, already swearing she would never serve under Briggs if he somehow ended up in command after the war. Elias Cain did not stay for the celebrations. He left before the parades, before the reporters arrived, before the politicians could pin medals on his chest. One morning the shuttle carrying him to a distant outpost simply vanished from Earth's tracking systems. Some said he died in some forgotten corner of space. Others swore they saw him years later on remote colonies where no one asked questions about the past. But among the alien ruins drifting across the edge of Jupiter's orbit, in the silence where the dreadnought had fallen, there were whispers on both sides of the war. Whispers about the man with no mercy who came from nowhere, ended a war, and then disappeared like a ghost into the stars.